Super excited to announce the Law Firm Retreat Design Your Future being held this August 5th through 8th, 2026 in the Denver, Colorado area. Teaming up with law firm architects, Power Strategy Group, we're going to be having an amazing opportunity for up to 15 firms to work on the business, not in the business. Find out more at powerstrategygroup.com.
The number one factor, though, is age. So most people instinctively kind of get that, but age is not your friend. And that's why putting this thing off and not any solution is better than just kicking the can month after month. Eventually we talk to firms who are like, well, we've got some stuff from 2022 and 2020. I'm like, oh boy, like that's not going to go well. Bad. So I think if I had to give you the one that's the statistics are on the side of it not being collectible is age. And what we found is that, what was the last stat we looked at? I think by 90 days of delinquency, so not that long, in some cases, invoices were losing as much as 47% of their collectability.
Well, welcome back, everyone. This is Ruby Powers with Power Up Your Practice, and I have a great guest today. I have Matt Darner. He's the co-founder and CEO of CollBox. We had the pleasure of meeting at TLTF in 2025, and then again at ABA Tech Show, where CollBox won first place in the Startup Valley. So welcome to the show, Matt. It's great to have you.
Oh, thanks for having me, Ruby. And that was a crazy time, huh? Well, I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about it, but that was a lot of cortisol getting on stage in front of people. I was freaking out, and even more so when we were lucky enough to win it. So that was you caught me right after that, and I was like, I'm not sure I'm making any sense. So it was a good time.
No, you were. Well, for those who don't know, what is CollBox?
Yeah, so we do the much loved process of chasing past due bills for law firms. You can think about us as tech infrastructure. So we integrate with practice management systems, detect when bills go past due, and then start following up with intelligent cadences. So not just technology, we do have email reminders, we're adding in smart text messaging, and really building accounts receivable workflows for law firms, right? With intelligence and timing. But we also have, and this is sort of the big surprise, we have a team of folks trained in accounts receivable that actually pick up the phone and make those soft touch phone calls too. So get a little bit of both with us. My thesis on this is, in an AI obsessed world, it's really important for things in the financial sector to have a human in the loop really paying attention. And as excited as we get to about AI and agentic futures, not everything's ready for prime time yet. So it's good to have smart, empathetic people on the phone working with law firm clients to help get those past due bills handled.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, human in the loop. I feel like I've had to be using that term more and more recently, like it's the term du jour or something like that.
Totally.
Like, we're still needed. We can't completely get rid of us.
Exactly. But yeah, it's I always tell people, just think about how like Chat GPT is kind of such a yes man sometimes, right? I swear it could be like, the sky is blue. And if you're like, no, it's not, you're like, you're right, it's not blue. And then imagine an agentic collector who's like, you owe $500. And the client's like, no, I don't. You're like, you're right. No, you don't. I was like, we're going to get sued if we just to get blown up. And so, that's just maybe a textbook example, but there's more. But I think for me, more than just accuracy and technology, I'm a really big fan of the human touch, right? So I come from sales and business development. It's about partnership and relationships, and that's my whole career. And so even though I'm also a nerd and I get excited about technology, I don't want to lose that. I don't think anyone really wants to. Like, we want good outcomes in our technology and our practices, but I don't think anyone's like goal is to necessarily lose that human thread. Obviously, we want to be efficient with our dollars too, but yeah, I really like finding the balance between that as we continue to build over here. I think it's important.
I want to ask you more how you got into this line of business, but I actually have a good example of how not having the human in the loop for collections. We received an email, and it said we owed this amount, and we had a disagreement about the amount because we had a prior arrangement. And so, but we kept getting this automated email that kept saying the same thing. We kept owing the same amount, and there was no like discussion or agreement. And then it was getting really frustrating because it's still not resolved actually.
Oh,
And I'm
yeah.
having to like a text or contact a point of contact in the company to say like, can you talk to this person? Is this person a human? Like, are we just getting an automated response? But I mean, I was just thinking like, why couldn't somebody try to create what you're doing with just some automations? But it's like it's a combination of the cadence, the human in the loop, the automation, and sort of find that secret sauce, I guess, for going after the money.
Yeah, it's we talk about this basically every day. It feels like,
Okay.
between kind of sales and
Well,
marketing and vision for the future and then product, right? And what I think happens and people don't realize, accounts receivable is really nuanced, right? There's so
mhm,
many little details. Like you brought up, what you just brought up is a great example of that. And we can talk about certain practice areas where, that I've run into as well. And there's some prior arrangement. It's not notated in the system of record. So think about your practice management system, CRM,
uh-huh.
whatever got anywhere
Yeah.
that the technology is fetching from, right?
Mhm.
And maybe it's as simple as like, oh, they just don't pull from X field, and like you can kind of root these things out over time. But there's so much stuff in the wings, the kind of off frame here
Yeah.
that's just lost. And so I do think technology is getting better at finding those things. LLMs can reason to some degree on that, these sorts of
Mhm.
things, maybe look in interesting places. But yeah, you can sure make people mad just by,
Well, I was like,
scamming you. You
if
owe
I wouldn't
$10,000. Like you said it was 2,000. What the heck? It freaks people out, and then it just creates resentment too, or at least sort of alarm, right? And that's never good
yeah,
for a
it's
relationship.
sort of souring the relationship because they're using this automation and it's sort of like ruining the communication because I feel like they're not listening and they're just like, "Bleh, bleh, I'm a robot, just going to say the same thing over and over again."
Right.
Um, but anyway, so it's sort of funny. I have a good example to that, but at the
Example.
moment, so how did you get into, starting this company?
Oh, I'm just a crazy person. No, had more hair, first accounts receivable and collections work is a great way to lose your mind. No, how did we get into it? So my co-founder who runs kind of all product and platform over here, named Cameron Desatel, we've been friends for 2 decades. We went to college together. So just been best friends for a really long time, and we had a history of working at just different startups together. I've always been sort of a sales and the talking one, and he's been on the engineering side. So we had this relationship of he builds it, I sell it, I guess, for a long time, not as founders, but just working in the startup culture and getting excited about that. And after the last company we were at got acquired, and we weren't founders there, but we were reasonably early, and just kind of bit us, I think, pretty hard. Like, ooh, that was a cool thing to watch, like the whole life cycle and the exit, and you get kind of like, we should try this. And I'm going to butcher the phrase, and it's one of those things. We do this not because it's easy, but because we thought it would be easy. No, it's like, we should start a business, and which I think I'm sure many of your listeners will resonate with. Like, we all have a little bit of a healthy dose of authority issues. Not really great being an employee as much as a boss. Like, we should do it; it'll be fine. And 10 years into this AR journey that I've been on, I'm like, okay, it's not easy, but I think it's built a lot of empathy, right? For me, just like I'm a small business owner, just like you are, just like your listeners are. But the AR thing is funny. I will say we just stumbled into it. And so Cameron won a hackathon that Intuit was hosting, related to their QuickBooks product. And the original concept of CollBox was a marketplace for finding a collection agency. Uh, if you use QuickBooks. So imagine you're a plumber, right? Anybody, there's law firms, plumbers,
Okay.
marketing agencies, just QuickBooks is so vast. What do you do with the really hard stuff? Like after you've chased it, up and down a
Uh-huh.
wall. Most, we worked with a lot of accountants and CPAs. Their viewpoint is just write it off, right? Which is like, okay, there's a
Mm.
time and place for that, but there was so little being done for those, like, kind of late stage AR, that Cameron, really can, I guess, kind of conceived of this idea of like, well, all the data lives in QuickBooks and there are collection agencies, so why don't we build a bridge? And so we had it like from QuickBooks to collections in 3 clicks was kind of this whole thing. And you could literally wire up QuickBooks with CollBox 1.0, like way 1.0. This is a long time ago. and then get an offer, a contingency based offer, and then kind of farm it out to a collection agency. And it was just a really great way to make sure you landed at a licensed, ethical, like well reviewed collection agency. Because that industry, when we use collections with a capital C, as I like to say it, like, man, that's an industry that's fraught with like fly by night operations and a lot of ethical,
Uh,
right? Not just for attorneys to have to consider when with their own bar rules, but just as an average business owner, like, how do I find someone who's not going to totally ruin my reputation in the market? And so that's where we started. He pitched this idea thanks to a business owner friend of his who was having like a collections issue, and a collection agency that he talked to said, well, yeah, go ahead and fax us the invoices and we'll get you an offer and get started. This was in 2015. It wasn't that long ago.
okay. Facts.
And I don't know about your house, but in my house, fax is a 4-letter word. Now, and
I've
so
I've been waiting
what,
for it to be extinct. I don't know.
right?
Is it
Like,
extinct already? Yeah.
did you just say
Anyway.
fax the invoice over? And so that's what's, we're like, it's one of those like engineers, the best engineers can't help themselves. He's like, hold on, there's an API, we'll figure it out. And he pitched it at this hackathon and sure enough won the grand prize. The founder of
Whoa.
Intuit's there. There's this giant check picture that floats around, and it's like what a crazy way to start. But we learned from that experience, and he quickly brought me in to kind of be on the sales side. Um, wow, a lot of businesses are hurting with like they're just writing off, we did the math back then, hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars, written off as bad debt without even most of the time attempting any sort of collection opportunity beyond just invoicing, maybe some gentle chasing. We'll talk about that, but basically nothing. People just invoice and hope, and then they write it off eventually. They don't do anything.
Oh,
And
yeah. I
so
see what you're saying.
right. So we started in this crazy place of like, let's help people send people to collections. In hindsight, you're like, that's not a great look. But it was a useful tool. We helped recover, a few $1 million for small businesses who really needed it. But then we interviewed them and we kept interviewing them. And we said, hey, well, what are you doing before collections? And they said, what do you mean? I'm like, what do you mean? What do you mean? Like, what do you pick up the phone? Like, who's doing that? And they were like, no, we're just sending out the bills. And it became clear that they needed something softer, more automated, but without losing that human touch. And we gradually just moved into this AR done for you is something I like to use, sort of service. But classically, much like your listeners, if you try to practice every area of law, right?
Mhm.
You're not going to be a very good attorney at anyone, at all practice areas. We were trying to help everybody. We made that classic mistake of like, yeah, plumbers, marketing agents, everybody, come on in, we'll get it. And as you might, in hindsight, we know we didn't grow very much, right? We just kept kind of chasing our tails for a couple of years, and first time founder. So I try to be very transparent with like all the mistakes I've made so that anyone could avoid any of them. And we, a few years ago, we said, we have to niche down. We kept getting law firms interested, but we weren't integrated with the practice management systems to do
Mm,
this. So,
yeah.
we actually, some fantastic accounting firm owner friends of ours who've always been great advisors were like, hey, we niche down to legal. You should integrate with Clio. You should integrate with, all the kind of the usuals. And we did. And sure enough, in the middle of 23, we integrated with Clio. We tripled our revenue in the back half of that
Wow.
year. And then thankfully, shout out to our friends at Clio, they named us one of the best new apps in their ecosystem that year. And things just kind of kept stacking. Obviously, and it keeps going, right? With the ABA Tech Show win just last week or 2 weeks ago, the more you lean into a community, of course, the more it leans back into you. So I think of it as like niching down into practice areas for attorneys, but we just needed to find our home, for years I've been very, very pleased with how we've done it. So.
That's awesome. That's a really good like theme or message too, just niching down and finding your home. And that could be applied in many different ways, but like in finding your sweet, the sweet spot and just and the secret sauce of and I've noticed that with some service providers, like the ones who say, yes, we can do that, but they've never done that thing before. It just they're spinning their wheels trying hard to please a lot of people. I mean, I think that's what they say. If you try to be all things to all people, you'll go out of business. But
Got really close a couple times, yeah, or at least worn out. Like, I think in our
yeah,
we've always been really lean. I think, my co-founder and I are just we're careful with money. We took a little capital, like, VC type money, things like that. And that was really helpful to learn, kind of tuition dollars in some ways as first time founders. There's so many things I would never do again, but you can't really be mad about it. Learning is so long as you've learned it, then you can move forward and carry that onwards. But yeah, we tried to be everything to everyone. And, just every month it was like we didn't understand their business, right? We were like, oh, well, how do marketing
Mhm.
agencies behave versus law firms? Well, there's plenty of parallels there as like a professional services type business. Okay, but when you introduce like plumbers or, architects or what is the weirdest one we had? We had like people who would do like ice sculptures. And then to the other department, like, yeah, we're doing AR you should probably not deliver the ice sculpture before it gets paid, like before you get paid. And they're like, sure enough, I mean, so that's something I know we'll talk about, like mistakes in AR processes for law firms. It's actually really relevant, but you know, there was some crazy stuff, but it was cool because we got to meet so many business owners and it was like a really good journey. But from a business perspective, it was a horrible idea. So,
Like
yeah,
they try to return the ice sculpture and it's just a puddle of water or
but it
something like
melted. I
yeah,
don't know.
it
Just like
melt
one of this, we're like, no warranties, no warranties.
yeah.
Yeah, that was a funny one. But yeah, I still think about some of the random just
Actually, like, the more you're mentioning other companies, I remember this, because part of the reason why I wrote my books about law practice management, helps small business owners was because I saw as a child of a small business owner, like,
Mhm.
the hard life that it was if you didn't know what you were doing and just, like, struggling through that, just like you were saying, first time founder, and which a lot of people are, when they're going into entrepreneurship. And I just remember, like, yeah, accounts receivable. I remember learning that as a young kid. Accounts receivable
So wild,
sounds
right?
yeah, like why aren't you
Just some
collecting
dinner
them?
table talk.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
no problem.
My dad had a shower fixture mirror business, and so
Okay.
anyway, so back in the day. This episode is sponsored by Candle AI, the legal email assistant that helps legal teams spend less time on client emails. You heard me right, spending less time on emails. Candle AI works with both Gmail and Outlook, so you don't have to learn a new tool. And then it connects with popular case management systems like Clio, Filevine, INSSoom, and more to come. It instantly shows you your case and the client details the moment you open a client email and right inside your inbox. Then that means less context switching and time spent jumping to different tabs to figure out what you need to respond. Candle can also draft context-aware responses to client emails and makes it easy to create, edit, and manage your email templates. If you want to save time and take back control of your inbox, check out Candle AI. I highly suggest it. All right. So moving over to the problem nobody fixes. And actually, I'm really interested now, like what you're saying about what you've learned about the law firms and like,
Sure.
you just sort of like, so when you first look at a firm's AR situation, what are you typically seeing, or what are some of the things that you take note of?
Yeah, well, the like half joke but totally true thing is no one calls when things are great. And so, you're always walking into some kind of fire in our line of business. And that's okay, right? Because that's what we're here to do, is solve hard problems. But whether
Uh-huh.
I'm consulting or, working through the CollBox angle, I feel, there's usually an accumulation of very aged invoices. And what
Mm,
that tends to be is closed matters, right? Where the legal work has been completed. We're going to talk a lot about leverage, right? I'm sure during this episode, because that's, maybe one of
yeah.
the biggest things I can impart upon the audience. And just a sense of like, what do I do with all this? And I keep seeing that, my aging report, I'm running my financials and my practice management or accounting system. And I keep seeing this like number, this glaring number, and it's offending me and it's keeping them up at night. And
Mhm.
the reality is it's not as simple as it's all collectible, and it's not as simple as you should write it all off either, right? Because it's somewhere in between. AR is so many shades of gray, and it depends on each client and everything, and their means and all kinds of stuff. But I typically see that. I mean, that's sort of a selection bias, I think, in the line of work, but pretty healthy amount of accumulated AR. I would say table stake. This is just kind of gut check here, but we work with a lot of small law firms, right? So I see a lot of like 3 to 5, 3 to 10 attorneys. So definitely some bigger ones here and there too. But for that size of firm, just as sort of a benchmark, easily, 300 to $800,000 just hanging out in the what we call
Oh,
the 90 days plus. That's sort of the sort of
uh-huh.
infinite bucket on your AR aging report, right? Sometimes it's 120 plus, but either way, that idea of at the end of the report, there's just this growing monstrous number. And when we see that, we go, that's a house, that's a boat, that's a whatever it needs to be, whatever your dream
Oh, that really
is.
puts things in perspective. Damn.
And
Yeah.
that's tuition
Uh,
for my kids. That's, vacations for
yeah.
years. It's, whatever is your reason, right, for running your business. You see that number and it starts to hurt, right? And so I think that's when we open the door, and then it becomes like picking it apart after that and kind of bucketing it, which we'll talk about.
Well, is this more of like a mindset, like they're avoiding the awkward conversation of chasing the money, or they don't have the systems in place, or they don't think they have the person power to go after it, or a combination of all of the above? Or what do you think's the root cause of that?
Yeah, I think a little bit of everything is definitely
Mm,
present every time. Um, and yeah, we do some interesting stuff to analyze this, right? So, number one, categorically, attorneys hate confronting their clients about money, right? I mean, this, everyone, it's kind of like just such a foregone conclusion that no one challenges that. You might get the sub 1%. I call them the bulldogs. I'm like, all right, you should join us, like, what are you doing? Now, very rarely, though, is that someone who's
mhm.
I love calling my clients for me. And even if you did, which again, 99% of attorneys don't, that's a or a utilization crisis, right? Like you need to be out there, especially if you're an hourly billing type attorney. But even if you're not, you have strategic things to be doing in your firm. Chasing, past due bills is effectively throwing good money after bad, I feel. Doesn't mean it shouldn't be
Mhm.
getting done. Now, that's not what I'm saying, of course, but the attorneys, it's like the executives in a like Tim Cook is not chasing past due bills at Apple. Right? That's a
Right,
crazy
right.
example because of how big they are. But just even a mid-sized company, like of course that's a bad use of time for strategic people like the executives in that example or attorneys in firms. So that's one thing. I think they're not they're very opposed to doing it. And if you're a smaller firm, then what does that mean, right? If you're a true solo, heaven help you. I know you guys are underwater. Like there's a lot going on. Like just solo, not even admin support. That's really tough,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
That's sort of you got to kind of climb your way out of that, and eventually get the resources to staff up. An assistant is a better first hire than an AR solution, right? Like, if you're a
Mm,
true solo. But if you've got a little bit of staff, then I think what happens, and we run analytics on this a lot, is overwhelmingly it falls on someone inside the firm to do this chasing, to do this calling, communicating. So it's up to imagine a paralegal, office manager, or an assistant, right? If not the attorney themselves, who now is in charge of all the other things that they do, right? Legal work, if you're a paralegal, uh, you know, managing the office supplies and the rent and just all these other things, right? But then now you have to conceive of an AR policy for the firm, right? Which is maybe not or almost certainly not your background. Then I have to execute the policy. And part of that policy is picking up the phone and kind of dealing with what I call the ick factor, right? Of like, now I have to talk to
mhm.
these clients and then the closer you are to the legal work, if you're in
Yeah.
consumer law, especially, I think like family, immigration, criminal are really good examples, and there's more. You're tied up. These people are going through really hard times. Like, no one's with like a family law attorney or an immigrant or criminal defense, like when things are going great. So they know that selection bias thing that I have of like times are tough, and then they want to help. The biggest hearts I've seen, right, are some of those areas
Mhm.
of practice, but unfortunately, that distorts your view, right? Like, oh, I need to help them out. I need to do that. Helping is, of course, a good thing. And we should always lead with empathy and give dignity to our clients. But we also have to operate from a place of sustainability, right? You're a human being and you matter too as an attorney, and you have employees maybe, right, that depend on you to make good financial decisions. So it's about establishing that. And I think the biggest thing to answer your question, I think, is beyond just reluctance to deal with it as an individual attorney, is the person responsible for designing and executing the system just doesn't have the training, right? And that's because of course
Mm.
they don't, right? That's 95% of businesses, not just law firms, right? We're all generalists wearing lots of hats, right? So I do marketing stuff a lot, and I'm like, why? I'm more of a sales guy. Put me on camera, that's fine. But then it's like, go build a keynote, and I'm like, oh, why am I doing this? But it happens. Doesn't mean it's always the right choice.
I heard a long time ago to separate the person doing the work from the one collecting the money, because it just helps keep like better boundaries. And I when I heard that, I was like, okay, I leaned into that because like
Yeah,
I'll give the fees in the consultation, but even when they start wanting to talk about payment plans or something, I'm like, we'll talk to the billing assistant. Like we have guardrails on that, but like I don't
right.
want to get all involved in that. And it's a combination of being better with time, but then also like I think I'm more of like that softy who's like, oh, and but you're right. And I've also heard the people say, like, have a picture of your kids or your family or whatever, maybe the
Mhm.
boat or the house, the vacation
Right,
home, whatever, like you're saying, and remember that when people are asking for a discount or you're not going after the money that you've already earned. You said something about leverage. Why don't we make sure we cover that before we forget? Is
yeah,
that like when you're talking about like when the case is still active and you still have, yeah, because I think
100%. Yeah,
whatever you're gonna say, like, but I think that's the reason. One of the reasons why we get a little freaked out about this is because we're like, there's a lot of things we can't back out of the case just because of money. Um, and like I'm thinking about immigration court.
mhm,
And we're getting close to the hearing. And like I've had my team chasing after the money. But like I can only get so close to a hearing with
right.
when trying to back out.
That's right,
Um,
that's right.
and if I mention it's about money, I probably won't get my name off the case. And then it gets
Mhm.
into like what I'm an indentured servant or something like that,
Yeah, that term you use is
Yeah.
perfect. I use it a lot. It's like an indentured servant. That's exactly what it feels like, and I think there's an ethical quandary there too. Like, okay, so
Yeah.
now you can't get off the case.
But then I'm
You
supposed to
you have to
zealously
maintain
represent
it,
you, but I
but do your
resent you.
level best. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
I feel, I mean, obviously, I'm biased and passionate about this topic, but I think that's ridiculous. Like, in no other profession, I think, is that, a consideration, right? And so I think that, obviously there are rules for that for a good reason. I'm not trying to like, lampoon anything too strongly, but yeah, of course it's going to be a conflict. And so you're exactly right. When I say leverage, I do these, I'm not sure when we'll go live. So the ALA conference is coming up here in about a week, so kind of early April, or mid-April. And luckily got a chance to. I've been invited to speak at that one. So I always do these classes on collections, cash flow, taking the stress out of running your firm, and
Mhm.
a big part of it is leverage because as great as we are at what we do, right? And I think I've hired the best team and built the best team to chase past due bills for law firms. It's almost like what I said at the beginning, though. Like, we created this one solution for really past due invoices to find a good collection agency. Well, then what did we do? I jokingly say we swam closer to shore, right? So they're like, okay, now what if we just had good follow up hygiene and staying on top of it? As soon as it went past due, then we would do better than collections, and that's true. We do. However, you can just keep swimming closer to shore, right? Until finally you get to a place where I'm going to drop them before the hearing or before they dig that hole.
Mhm.
We work with a lot of family law and immigration and a lot of consumer law because of course the pain is highest there, I think. But
Mhm.
yeah, you can go from money, take a quick family law example. You can go from $5,000-$10,000 in trust to negative 20,000 and like a blink of an eye. And
Wow.
just as you said, similar story. If you get too close to that hearing or that appearance, it's over, right? You're stuck. You're on that case. And then, you end up maybe talking to me or maybe talking to a collection agency. And that's where it's hard. So where I want to take, my own products and things like that, but also just the educational element of where I want to put more out into the world is mind your leverage, right? That's the next step up the chain is don't get into the place where you have as much past due. Or if you do, I mean, I think look, things are going to go past due. That's just life, I think, in this profession, right? But managing it quickly, watching that time window, and the velocity of matters is so different by practice area, right? So
Mm.
family is very different than immigration than corporate or something, right? Where it's like, no, net 30 is more like net 90, net 120, and it's fine, and they always pay like fine. But yeah, I think that getting out, right, is really important, really, really important if we're gonna, not get ourselves into a terrible situation. Every single family law firm I've talked to, for example, has been burned to the tune of tens or if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in that exact way. And that's that tuition fee that we talked about, right? Of like,
Yeah.
okay, and then they start looking for solutions. Maybe it's, my world, or maybe it's flat fee, right? There's a big conversation, as you know, around flat fee in the profession, especially as it relates to AI. I'm in the middle. Like, I think always, I mean, if you can get paid up front before you do anything, you should. Of course you should. It's sort of opposite of like, I'm the AR guy. Well, it's like, no, you should do that. That's like, I'm not going to pretend that you shouldn't do that, right? Like, that's 100% better. But I would remind everyone too, like a Ferrari is technically a flat fee item. You know what I mean? Doesn't mean we could afford it all at once, right? So when we start breaking up things into payments, then it becomes AR, right? So we just have to manage it.
So I'm sure everyone's listening are like, what more can you tell us to reduce our AR? But like,
Sure.
what other things that you see that would improve the collection or minimize the having AR, the numbers that you've been seeing? I mean, basically, what would the advice would you give us so that we wouldn't need your services? I
Yeah,
guess.
right, exactly. Yeah, no, it is. So it's all upstream, right? What can we do at the start of the engagement to have better downstream consequence, or not consequences, but results? And that is, it's a lot of things. So, like I mentioned, my career before running a business was mostly in sales and business development. So, a lot of selling, a lot of dealing with pricing, right? Setting expectations on price, and then, ultimately them, closing the deal is one thing, but then them retaining, right? If you just think about any old service, but same for law firms, are they going to have a good experience and either repeat business or, refer other people if it's more of a one-time thing? And I think setting good expectations on pricing is one area where most attorneys really, really struggle. Like,
Mhm.
um, why? Because the model is difficult, right? When we talk about retainers, especially, like, so there's a few, like a lot of diversity in practice on types of retainers. And are we is it really more of a deposit that we don't touch till the end of the case, and we kind of keep it almost like a deposit on your apartment or something? Or is it, no, it's an evergreen retainer, you're supposed to top it up? I, when asking during my own consultations, what's your retainer policy, if you have one, walk me through it. And I can tell you that if the attorney struggles to explain it to me, then that means they're struggling to explain it to the client, who is even further removed, right? We're all sort of experts by being in the legal space. Clients aren't. They don't know anything, about that. And I don't think, until I really got into legal, barely understood how a retainer was supposed to work, right? Grateful
Mhm.
that I had to engage a lot of legal services in my life, and so they, am I paying? I just gave you $5,000. Why did I get a bill for $300? Well,
You know,
but I mean, you know where this is going. So
I don't know if this is unsophisticated or not, but I just sort of go like this, and I have to explain it in English and Spanish. I said
yeah.
at the hourly retainer was like, it's sort of like gas in the gas tank. Like, I need you to have enough so I don't have to be stressed out about it, so I could do my job. Because if it goes below too much of a level, then we're going to be freaking out about that, and I'm
Mhm.
not going to be able to do the work.
That's
And then
great.
I say,
Yeah.
and whatever we don't use, we give it back. So I was like, that analogy doesn't work. It's not like I'm going to go
Breaks down
siphon
at
out
the
the
end there.
gas from the
Hey,
tank
most of the way, yeah.
for the majority of the analogy. Like, oh, okay. Because
I think
because
simple is better.
law firm individuals don't interact with law firms, right?
Right.
And then they might not understand this hourly thing. And we're trying to move away from hourly, but we still haven't for a remove for immigration court, but everything else is
Yeah.
flat. So
Right.
anyway, but I think you're right. I think we sort of tiptoe around the finance part because we're just like feel uncomfortable,
Mhm.
and we're just like, oh my gosh, we have to talk, we have to make a connection, we have to establish what they're eligible for, we have to give them a roadmap, we have to tell them what the cost is. And
So,
then when they start talking about like payment plan, that's why I have a lot of it written down, or I
mhm.
email it to them and I walk them through it. And
Yeah.
then I say we do a free follow up within 2 weeks. Let it sink in what questions they have. And then there's
That's
always
good.
a billing assistant they could talk to.
So
But
that's
I
something
can't
you said that I just wanna, one, great job on that. Two, I think doesn't have to be
think,
you, right? Like, that's maybe the
yeah,
theme of what I
exactly.
guess the whole theme of my business is, like, it doesn't have to be you. And in collections, that's great because nobody wants it to be them, so that's a little bit easier. But, I think that, honestly, I know this sounds a little funny, but, like, intake to me is effectively the sales process for you guys. I think of it as in the classical sales processes. There's
Yes,
more to
yeah.
it,
And I
right?
feel like sometimes attorneys feel queasy about sale the word sales. I don't
Right.
know.
But
I've
it's
noticed
real.
that.
Yeah, and it's a
Yeah, it
part of
is.
the business, and I think that's what it is, right? Like, at the end of the day, and this is not in no way a knock, because 'cause I've gone through every stage of this in my journey too. But I think the ability or inability for an attorney to take off the attorney hat and put on the, the owner, CEO, insert title
Mhm.
here hat makes all the difference, right? Because if you can only keep your blinders on and stay in the this is me in sales, right? So I naturally gravitate to doing consults and closing business because I it's my comfort space. I've been doing it forever. And now actually just sort of to give a real example, just hired our first like major sales hire to get out of founder led sales, right? Like, so I'm living the thing too. And I tried this years ago and had some like more junior people and it went terribly. And we're like, oh no, like layoff, sorry. Here's the severance package. Love you. It didn't work out. But now really hiring great salespeople. Like started with one that was like my mandate. I was like, I have to find a great salesperson that I don't know that you can really train sale. I mean, there's some innate personality type thing there that you just love it or you don't, and that's totally fine.
Yeah.
There's no wrong answer. But I think get yourself a great salesperson, stick them into intake. You can teach process. I think. I think if it's like what button to click and order of operations, but there's something innate about salespeople, good salespeople, that they just love for the love of the game, as we say. Like they're just into it. Like they like talking to people and they, I think you want to find the right salespeople who want to help people too, like high empathy stats, right? I think that's important too, because sales can be very cutthroat, and that's something that I've unfortunately worked with a lot of. That's where sales gets that kind of queasiness you mentioned, is because
Mhm.
the used car salesman example. Like I've worked with people like that, and that really bums me out because I feel like it tarnishes something that I'm and otherwise like a career I'm really proud of like only selling things I believed in and not pushing too hard and being consultative. But then there's some who are just like, they'll do whatever it takes to make money, and that's a bummer. So
I was thinking about all of it we've been saying, and I think in the past I've had like the finance billing bookkeeper-ish person in charge of going after AR, but they're not always the most talkative, empathetic
right. It's a totally
person.
different skill set. It's a
Yeah.
wildly and
Yeah.
because it thematically clicks, and it does, billing and collections are like flip side, two sides of the same coin, like so intertwined,
Mhm.
you couldn't possibly
Mhm.
separate, but wildly different personality types. So we work with a couple of great, partners that I like working with, like I'm an outsourced kind of billing group who they're
Mhm.
not as much of a tech company. They don't think quite like a tech company the way I think we do, but called Mrs. June Legal. Randa Prendergast runs a great shop where she'll like, drop the SOPs and then even place a biller in there. But why
Uh-huh.
we ended up partners is because all of the billers kept getting asked to do collections work, and they're like, stop, we don't want to do that, like stop at, like it was really causing them some frustration. And now there's great technology too, like we love like Tempello, Ajax, and Billables, like kind
Oh,
of listing a lot,
uh-huh.
just don't show favorites too much. I like all of them a lot actually, and they're more about capturing the hours, approval workflows, using AI to like actually find hours you probably didn't bill for. And so that's a great business model that they all have. And so now there's ways to get that better. But that's a very, what did we just talk about? Like process, accuracy, numbers, right? And then if you talk about collections, there's like charisma kind of, and like empathy and persuasiveness and thick skin, I think, right? Because there's a lot of no that happens. It's like that's why I think in sales is sort of like you get told no way more than you get told yes in sales, right? Like so many more times no. And you just have to keep moving, right? You have to be resilient.
So, I have a question here, and I'm sort of curious what you're going to say, but like, so
Yeah.
at what point have you seen an invoice, an unpaid invoice, become unlikely to ever be collected? Like, what are like the warning signs, or you're like that you could just look at, you're like, this isn't going to happen, or something like.
Sure, sure. It is actually pretty tough to just judge that like right from the hip. The number one factor though is age. So most people instinctively kind of get that, but age
Mhm.
is not
Yeah.
your friend. And that's why putting this thing off and not any solution is better than just kicking the can month after month. Eventually we talk to firms who are like, well, we've got some stuff from 2022 and 2020. I'm like, oh boy, like that's not going to go well, and someone has to make money to even attempt to go after it, whether it's you're paying your staff or a vendor or whatever, and you don't want to throw good money after bad. So I think if I had to give you the one that's the statistics are on the side of it not being collectible is age. And what we found is that what was the last stat we looked at? I think by 90 days of delinquency, so not that
Oh,
long, you know,
yeah.
in some cases, invoices were losing as much as 47% of their collectability. And that's really like dollars in, but you can also think of that as a proxy for like ability to collect it all, right? So you have to look at these in big pools, right? Of like, each invoice can behave very differently, but when you look at it in aggregate, like how many dollars are you going to get, the longer you let it go. And when we see just from our own data is when we get out to like 2, 3 years past due, it's in the mid teens, success rate, like 15, 16%. So if you're years plural past due, like, find yourself a very economical way. I wouldn't say do nothing. Like if you just slept on it for 2 years, and that happens actually, because you're busy being an attorney and you're kind of avoidant, right? On that sort of thing. Take a run at it, but have a very measured approach, right? I'm going to take 90 days and I'm going to run after, I'm going to do these fixed actions, and whatever I get, the rest I'm going to write off. That's what I would educate most people to do on the older stuff. Really, once we're talking a year and a half, even a year past due is really difficult stuff because the client's moved on.
Mhm.
If you haven't been actually chasing them that whole time, and of course you haven't, because who's going to, like, for a year, you're going to stay on
Yeah.
down? Like, no, we've all got things to do. Um, the
Well,
client,
because you're thinking about your ROI, like, is this the best use of my time, or should I go after the more recent ones?
that's right.
And and so I guess I didn't really ask, and I know we're running close on time, but like, how exactly does it work when you integrate with the case management software? Like, you
Oh yeah,
like
from
just
the CollBox perspective.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's I always make this joke with people, and I think it went too far, but it's like I tried to start a tech company, but I found a very services shaped problem, right? No one's making these phone calls, doing the soft touches. So I think today's CollBox is like a very efficient services business. And I kind of half mean that because there's a lot of automation, but we're going to be adding so much more. I was talking about this in my pitch at Tech Show because there's so much low hanging fruit on just great automation now, especially with AI that doesn't go
Mhm,
to the scary place of AI,
mhm,
with the chasing. But you would sign up for CollBox, you connect your practice management system, and we just start detecting automatically as the bills go past due. So we look at the due dates, whether if you've got a grace period in there, great, we'll honor that. And then we would just decide together at what day past due do we start. And whether that's day one past due, day 5, day 7, so it all depends on customizing to practice area usually. Um, and then it starts in, automation goes first. We try to get some of those easier wins out of the
uh-huh.
gate with the email. Cause the number one excuse is, oh, I never got the bill. And we're all like, okay, yeah, but you did though.
But we know you opened it or something.
And, but okay, fine, we'll play along. So we resend the bill, how do I make a
Right.
payment, walk them through it, all that stuff. And one thing is unique for us, we don't touch the money. So we just
Mhm,
use that's why it takes us some time to build good integrations. Like, I know we were kind of joking about what we don't integrate with, but when we launch an integration, not only do we need the core data, but we want to pull in things like payment links. And that way the firm doesn't have to just, do a whole new thing and yet another payment method, right? There's already enough out there. So, but then, yeah, we feed it into this queuing system that then weaves in the phone calls from the humans. And we use dedicated reps, all North American, all native English speakers, all trained in AR. So it's a very different approach too. We go hire like kind of hardcore AR people to do that, but we basically break them up so they can make a lot of phone calls for multiple firms.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we have a lot of Spanish speaking clients, so we
Yeah.
we do like it that, but I'm sure some of your people are bilingual as well.
Yeah, so I say
Yeah.
North American because most of the team is in the US, actually, right here in
Uh-huh.
Austin, Texas with us, but we have reps in Mexico too for exactly that
Okay.
reason. So because we're in Texas, so we run into it a lot anyways. And then, also my family's mixed. My wife's from Mexico, like, very, very often working in Spanish and things like that too. I'm not making the calls. It's not business level Spanish. I'm the like bad at conjugating my verbs type of Spanish. But I make for a
Well,
fun tourist.
Duolingo, can make you a soccer announcer in just a few months, apparently. So
I know, right?
it's good.
Well, my solution was when dating my wife, I moved to Mexico with not knowing any Spanish and lived
Oh
there.
yeah.
That's and our
Where,
family.
where did you live? Where?
My wife's from Monterrey, Mexico, so kind of north
Oh,
of
okay.
Mexico, not too
Yeah.
far. straight
Yeah, I
cut,
have
straight to
family
the
in Saltillo. I know Monterey. Yeah.
Oh, Saltillo, yeah, I've been to Saltillo, actually. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
beautiful, the mountains are amazing, and, yeah, well, we were dating, she was studying English, in the US, and, she just wasn't planning to stay. She was like, "I'm not trying to meet somebody, and fall in love." And, but we got, like, 6 months in, she was time for her to go home, and we're like, "Ooh, a little too soon for marriage. What do we do?" And so I did the rational thing, and I sold everything I owned, and I moved to Mexico. And, I've always been a bit dramatic, I think business owners are crazy people by nature. So yeah, I moved there, but none of her family speaks any English, and so
So I
it
bet
was.
that was amazing
I
for
could keep you
Spanish.
guessing an hour of all the silly stuff, but it was like, what did your mom say? Like, oh, she seems mad at me. She's doing all this. She's speaking so quickly, and then I'm like, I barely understand. She's like, "Do you want eggs for breakfast?" Is what she asked. I'm like, oh, I'm never going to make it. 7 months of total immersion, though, will do wonders for you. So, uh,
I lived in Turkey with my in-laws, and I didn't speak Turkish, and it was
yeah,
really wild for the beginning, but, they were anyway, I found
something
some
in your
French
brain
was
that
in
just
there.
opens up and goes, all right,
Yeah. Well, you have to figure it out, you gotta go survive, we were
exactly.
living in a
It's
little
fun.
beach village. I was the only foreigner, like, from, like, 100 miles away,
I love it.
so I had to speak Turkish a little bit. Are you feeling overwhelmed by all the different things you have to do to run a law firm? Well, you're not alone. So many law firm owners are in the same boat. That's where Staffy steps in. More than 90 firms, just like yours, are leaning on their bilingual virtual staff for legal, administrative, marketing, and client facing work, plus their full HR support. I currently have 11 team members with Staffy across my own firm and Power Strategy Group, and it's been a total game changer. Schedule a free initial consultation at staffy.cc, that's stafi.cc, and use the code RUBY, RUBY, for $500 off. So, rapid fact questions.
Sure,
What's your
sure.
favorite board game?
Oh man. Oh, I was thinking about this. We got into kind of tabletop around here a little bit. I like this is a weird nerdy answer, but like I like Machikoro a lot. Um, and there's one called Sentinels of the Multiverse, where it's like totally a knockoff of Marvel, but you and your
Oh,
friends can kind of play as superheroes against the villain. I like co-op games. I'm a friendly collaborator type. So I don't like the ones that are like hardcore competitive. I think my feelings get hurt too easy. No. Uh,
okay. Well,
it's
I haven't heard of those, but I should know about. What would you consider your superpower?
Yeah, I think for me, I just like getting to know people. So connecting, I feel like business development type things, partnerships come pretty naturally to me because I just like getting to know people and finding ways to create value for everybody, and particularly, the clients at the end of the day. But I just like, I don't know, tinkering with solutions and partnerships a lot. So I think those connections and building those relationships is that's one of my favorite things to do. And
Oh,
talking,
that's
I guess.
awesome. That's
That
awesome.
seems to be the most important thing. So
Well, podcast guest or hosting sounds like a good thing for you.
I've been threatening to do it for a while. I was telling your team that, before this. I'm like, maybe this is the year. We'll see.
This
I'll
is
have you on as a guest. You could be my first guest. You try it.
I'll take you up on it.
Cool.
What is a habit that you believe contributes to your success?
It's just this is going to sound a little self-aggrandizing and it's weird, but just being relentless. Like I feel like this is the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. And every day, like it's not every day you win like a big pitch competition like where we talked. And that was incredible. And that sets you up for energy for the next, few months. But like building a business is a grind. Like I tell every attorney I talk to, like for me, I just think resiliency. Like it just can't. I don't know. You can't be stopped if you refuse to stop. I guess, right? And so that's kind of my answer to
Yeah,
it.
true, true. Well, very inspiring. And what would be a book or podcast you would recommend to our listeners?
Oh man. All right. Well, there's some of the easy ones. I love a good diary of the CEO.
Mm.
I like Huberman stuff too. I mean, I think it's gotten really big now and maybe it's gone off the rails, but like getting into science and making that more approachable for someone. I'm more of an art and history guy. And so Andrew Huberman stuff I definitely love. It helped me learn a lot about like, getting healthier and or at least trying to get healthier, and fasting and things like that. So I guess those are some pretty simple
Okay.
ones. Everyone's seen those before, but I'm a big fan of those too.
No, I never heard of it, but
Oh
I'm
yeah,
gonna
so
go
like
check that
Diary of the
out.
CEO will
Thanks
get
for
you all your
Well, I've heard
business
of
stuff.
Diary of
That one
CEO.
is
Yeah.
Yeah, Andrew Huberman's great. Huberman Labs is kind of his thing, and it's
Okay.
think Neil deGrasse Tyson, how he made like astrophysics more interesting for all of us. Like if you've seen him speak, like somehow
Uh-huh.
we can make that approachable. I feel like Huberman does that for like biophysics, right? Instead of and things like that.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Well, how can people find you and stay connected with you?
Yeah, so look, it's my style is definitely not like I know I said I'm a sales guy like a million times, but I like consulting with people and chatting. So just email me if you have questions, you just want like advice on AR. We can't actually help everyone as we talked about. We don't integrate with everything on the planet, so we're still growing, but Matt at callbox.co, so COLLBOX.co, or just hit me up on LinkedIn. So I'm always happy to chat. I'm a weirdo who likes talking about accounts receivable with law firms. So uh, there might be others. I don't know. So far, I might be the only one. So I'm here if you need me.
Well, thanks, Matt. I guess I'm lucky to have bumped into you at 2 conferences in the last less than a year, and
I know.
congrats again on the
Thank
Startup Alley, and, I'll probably see you at the next thing because 'cause we're both in Texas, but,
I know it. Gotta keep it moving. So
it's a
there's
big
always something
state.
good. Yeah,
Well, thanks again, everyone, for listening. I think we all took a few lessons away on how to chase the money and make sure that we don't have too much of an AR problem in the first place, and what we can do to put the systems in place and have the right people supporting us. But, we also have CollBox that exists. And so that's a great thing to know about. Well, thanks, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Take care. Thank you for tuning in to Power Up Your Practice. I'm Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. We love your reviews. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us one and share this podcast with someone else so that they can know what you've been learning on our show. And make sure to check out the Power Up Your Practice book. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon. It's packed with 25 chapters of strategies to grow and streamline your firm. And we also have the free Power Hub community on School to keep the conversation going in between the episodes. So make sure to keep powering up your practice, and we'll see you next time.